On behalf of the captain and the crew, we'd like to welcome you on board Flight 076, now departing to the return of ticketing. Cabin crew, arm doors, and cross-check.
Thank you for listening to us today. If this is the first time listening to this podcast, welcome aboard. If you're a returning listener, we're glad you're back. Seat 1A provides tips and tricks from more than 5 million miles worth of flying to help you take off from the crowd.
In today's experience, recorded on the 12th of September, 2023, we're going to go into a deep dive into all things related to your ticket and ticketing and everything that gets you onto the aircraft.
And then we'll wrap up with a discussion about current events in the world of aviation. We've got recent experience in ticketing and funny things that happen and delays and rebookings and everything else. And did your flight back from Toronto to Vancouver work okay with your nicely put seat in row 7?
That's right. Porter Airlines. Yeah, we can do a quick little trip report on that. So yeah, just to recap, me and my family, we flew on a fairly new route for one of the other Canadian airlines known as Porter Airlines. And they recently picked up a new fleet type, the Embraer 195. Price, timing, all very good. So checked in at Toronto Pearson Terminal 3. And this is where things went not sideways, but it was a bit wonky, I guess. So, in traveling with a young child, we had stroller, car seat, all this stuff to check in. Now, typically, either A, there's a family check-in queue, or B, you just go to the counter and all gets dealt with. Well, here, they had an agent at that desk queue. So I went there and they said, no, go to the kiosk to do the tagging. And then there's the self-serve machines. I was like, but we have a stroller and a car seat, but okay. So go to the kiosk, print. We were checking in one bag. So it printed out one tag. And I was like, well, where's the tags for the remainder? And then an assist agent showed up. She's like, oh, you have to go line up at the desk.
Oh, gee.
But I was like, but I have the tag for the bag. She said, well, you can drop that here. So fast bag, drop that one bag and then go line up. So essentially we had to do both methods, which I thought was very redundant.
Yes.
Yeah. So I tagged the main suitcase, put it on the machine, in it went, and then went. We were being a bit sneaky. So the stroller, we have a full carry bag for it. I loaded it with more stuff. So it was more than just a stroller inside because we were overweight. So lining up, and it was, they only had two agents on. I thought, okay, whatever. Well, the manager decides to open a desk herself, and I end up getting her. I'm like, oh man, this woman's gonna like eagle eye this, and like, and then the problem is now our main bag has gone down already, so it's not like I can like trade stuff or move stuff around. So a slight bit of panic, but it was fine. It was more just the main weight, and it was fine. Tagged it, put it down. No, then sorry, it didn't go down the main belt because there was no main belt. We were then sent to the oversized belt.
Okay.
Which is fairly common. And that was lining up. And then there was like someone there having an issue. So they were trying to tell us to like go to another one and traipse around the terminal. Fortunately,
so it's like musical belts.
Yeah, it was starting to get a little bit frustrating, but then it all cleared and then we were able to put it in there. And then, through into Terminal 3, nothing remarkable. It's kind of the same terminal that it's always been. Food options.
A bit of rental, yeah.
Yeah. But what Porter does, they operate out of a fairly new is a bit of a
newish
term now, newish. Within the last decade, they, obviously as all airports, they're trying to like desperately find more space and gates and terminals. So they built this satellite extension where you have to kind of go
Oh, you did
underground,
the tunnel bit, yeah.
the tunnel bit, which a lot of people don't realize. And it always made me chuckle. I mean, when I was a crew member and the first time we encountered that section, it threw us all off because when you're a crew member, you're auto programmed, especially in common airports that you go through like almost daily. I'll get my coffee here. I'll go to this washroom that I like going to, and you know exactly how many minutes it takes to get from point to point, so from gate to checkpoint and all this stuff. Well, this underground tunnel threw us all off because it's like four moving blocks.
Five, yeah,
Yeah, it's quite a run if you're not expecting it. And so why it made me chuckle is because there's always passengers that are panicking because they see how far and how long, and they think they're going to miss or they're exhausted or
yeah.
yeah, kind of throws
And I
them
know
in.
when I've taken a flight out of that terminal, like when it comes up, when checking in, it's like, all right, leave a little bit earlier than planned.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, you get over there, it's fine, it's new. Boarding wasn't an issue, and the plane was very nice. It's practically brand new. Legroom, all this kind of stuff is fantastic. Super clean. It's a 2-in-2 config, so it had a bit of a narrower feel, but it was all right. Pretty standard North American Canadian airline service, but the service was, I'll say, flawed.
Hmm.
So Porter Airlines prides himself on offering free streaming Wi-Fi, which there was, and that part was excellent. We were streaming full on Netflix in the air.
Oh, wow.
I was like, and with no interruption. So odd little blip, but it was strong. I was like, this is impressive, and it was free. Then they also say, okay, free beer, wine, and premium snacks, and whatnot. Okay, which is a rarity these days. So that's a little perk. So we get up, they do a drink service, they do a buy on board service, and then we're all sort of sitting around waiting for these free snacks. I mean, the free snacks are just some fancy olives or like interesting almonds and maybe some chips. It's nothing major, but if you don't want to spend and you're kind of banking on this, then so be it. And then nothing. And then there was a gap. The free snacks came on second service. So everyone was a
Okay.
bit like confused. So I don't know if it was a crew not getting their service flow right or if that's just the way they run it. It was just a bit odd, very odd. And then yeah, I
Right.
mean the rest of it, arrival into YVR. Again, at YVR, sort of non-Air Canada, non-WestJet flights get punted to the old section of the original terminal where it's
Okay.
very cramped and a bit of a jostle, but it was fine. It was fine. So yeah, would I fly them again? Absolutely.
All right.
Price is right. So yeah,
Cool, cool.
yeah,
But yeah, so because you got tickets for a good price, I think that's a good lead into talking about tickets and lots of people flying all over the place, and back in the air again, and people learning once again about is your and especially post-pandemic situations, like, is your ticket cancelable and refundable or rebookable, or do you have to pay differences in amounts or all sorts of things that go along with it, and a bunch of people who haven't flown for a while think they get a refund, but it's like, no, you can just change, but no refund on this ticket class that you've bought.
exactly. And here we're going to have a number of terms that kind of ebb and flow within each other. I mean, there's a ticket, which is a very generic term. There's a reservation, there's a PNR, there's a booking reference, and now there's the e-ticket. And for those that don't travel much, that all just gets mumble jumbled up together into one big mass. And people just say, I have a ticket. So what is the ticket? I mean, in all the days before any of the computer, you would have that physical paper chit, a ticket, just like riding on a bus. And that's how
Yeah,
airlines
with like
operated.
the red writing.
And that's what it ended up being was like the red carbon paper. And to do anything to get on a plane, you had to hand over because that represented money. The
Yeah,
money you paid was
in
translated
that
into
ticket.
this in that physical ticket. And we've touched on this
Because didn't they have to like trade it in, and that would be like sort of the
exactly.
currency with IATA or whatever to get the
Exactly. Yeah.
payments.
And that's how the whole thing ran. I mean, this is all gone now. I mean, there must have been inter-airline mail bags worth hundreds of
Millions.
thousands of dollars of their own revenue to pull back in. And, employed people receiving this and processing this and sorting things out. It was probably quite an incredible machine.
Like an accounting department going through tickets.
Yeah, yeah. Now all in a chip processor at the click of a button.
Yeah.
So it's quite a world it's been. And I mean, this stretches out to all versions of travel agent and everything there because they would produce these tickets and have the rights to produce it and have that stock. So, you know, from that point, the ticket represented all things. But now it's a whole lot more because all things electronic. So I think one way to sort of looking at it is the minute you purchase a flight, the right to travel on an aircraft, you've paid your money to an airline, a third party agent, or some sketchy who knows what, then fine. What gets created is a PNR, passenger name record. So essentially, that if the easy way to think about it is there's now a file folder with your name on it.
Now, I'm going to interject here for a sec because I've seen this
Yeah,
before. But it's like sometimes when you book with a travel agent, you're not getting a PNR right away. You're getting well, we're going to keep our eyes on it, watch the prices, aggregate it, and within 48 hours of when your flight's going to happen, then we'll send you a PNR.
exactly, because who the PNR, who is that file folder with is the big question. If you're buying directly from the airline, well, that's the airline has made a file folder and you've made a purchase. They're going to put it in the folder and say, look, you have made a purchase for the flight. Fantastic. As you said, you buy from a third party, they have their own file folder. They then have to go and buy your right to fly from said airline of whatever trip you're doing.
Yeah.
When does that happen? How does that happen? Hopefully it's all smooth, but a lot
And
of times,
you hope that it's, what you've clicked in on and purchased, but then some of the sketchy ones who aren't necessarily super upfront, it's like, well, we told you we were going to fly you on airline X, but now we're going to fly you on airline K and change everything around. And oh, wait a sec, the bucket that we thought doesn't exist anymore, so now you got to pay more.
yeah, exactly. There's no terms to hold to it.
Yeah,
And again, that's why the original ticket, it was written in there, pay this, and to change it should cost X.
exactly. And
Or at
whatever
least refer you off of it.
international drawing, trading rights, whatever between currencies passing through IATA, it was like, all right, it worked, but it was messy if you lost a ticket.
Yeah. Now, a PNR can also be called a booking reference, a record locator, reservation code, trip itinerary code. For the most part, it's a five alphanumeric combination sequence that refers to you and everything about you on said trip. Trip being a flight, a multiple series of flights. Or, I mean, if you're talking about like vacations where you have like a cruise and a hotel, and that's when you kind of get into like bigger ones. But we'll kind of keep this focused on airline. So the booking reference or the record locator points to this file, right? And that's where your name record can be found. So for the most part, when you're checking in online and or making contact with an airline, you don't go in saying, "Hi, my name is this, and I'm booked on this flight. Can you look it up?" I mean, they can't. All they want to know is what's your booking reference, what's your record locator, what's the PNR, so they can find that file folder that has all your details to start doing whatever needs to be done.
And this has been said before, but when people are posting up, "Hey, I'm on this flight, and here's my picture on Instagram or whatever," it's like, yeah, you took a picture and your PNR is on there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you have the right access to systems and that file or that PNR is active, you could theoretically data breach and like collect a bunch of juicy
Exactly.
information on
Or
individuals.
really mess somebody up.
Yeah. So with the PNRs, one thing a lot of people don't realize is that each airline has their own sometimes, depending how strong. I mean, if you're booking with an alliance, Sometimes it carries through, sometimes it doesn't. But a lot of times, especially when you're booking like on Expedia or all these sort of third party kind of booking sites, you have to then go seek out the actual airline PNRs or record locators if you want to
Exactly.
try and do stuff online and manage your bookings and all. Sometimes it falls through. Like I've had a number of them where generally with Air Canada, it is the same one I can use on Lufthansa. It's the same one I can use on a myriad of other airlines. It flows through, but then sometimes you find that one random airline needs its own because on the back end the airlines aren't talking
Yeah.
in the system.
And then sometimes, you're booking with like a travel agent. It's like, okay, well, we can put these charges through, say, on a credit card ourselves. So you'll see Expedia, but then you're going to see, yeah, I paid for the airline through the travel agent, but the airline charges are going to show up separately because the airline needs them to be split out.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, as much as it's now 2023, the airline backend systems are not as advanced as some would like to think. Everyone thinks it's all just like in this massive mainframe and it all just gels together beautifully, but the airlines are still very independent of each other. It's almost like back-end trading, like how the money flows and who takes responsibility for what. Because as easily demonstrated in our last recording,
Exactly.
Turkish Airlines and Air Canada, and then when you involve points booking as another entity, they're all staring at each other at a table saying, "Well, no, it's you, it's you, it's you. So
It's your
who's
job. Yeah.
who's going to deal with this?" And that's where things get funky.
To put it gently. Yeah.
Yeah. So within a record locator, then you need to actually have a ticket, which is nowadays just called an e-ticket. And I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, a 16-digit number, e-ticket number. So when you look at your information, you'll find your five alphanumeric digit record locator, PNR, and then you have to associate an e-ticket. And that e-ticket is basically the proof that you have paid for the right to be on a flight. If you don't have that in there, you can have a record locator, but if there's no associated e-ticket, you're not getting on, or you're the whole thing is incomplete. And so when you're dealing with the e-tickets and the money part, and you have delays or you're rebooking, you have to make sure that that all gets aligned.
Yeah, and is it because I mean I'm just checking a recent booking. I mean, yeah, the PNR for this one is six characters long, and the ticket number is 13 digits. So
That's it. Yeah, 13. And usually the front three digits, I think, are for the specific airline. So all the Air Canada e-ticket numbers, I
mhm,
believe, all start with whatever it is.
yeah,
And
and the same with the PNR that every airline I think starts with has got their sequence at the beginning.
yeah, there's some logic to it, so it does help. I remember when I was working on the British Airways part of my career, and you would have the ticketing agent, and someone would come to a standard check-in desk. We'd pull them up, and then it would say no e-ticket associated with this reservation. So they've reserved a spot to be on the plane. They've reserved the right to occupy a seat. But for some reason, due to a change or something, the e-ticket was not there to be found. Right. So you can call
Right.
up anyone and say, I would like to. It's like, I don't know, going to a concert or a restaurant, I guess, saying, I would like to dine at this hour. Okay. And it meant yeah, you go into a restaurant and it's a restaurant that asks you to prepay your food. You show up and say, well, have you prepaid for your food? No. Well, you can't sit down because there's
Right.
going to be nothing to eat. Exactly the same situation. So we would have this thing flash on the screen, no e-ticket associated. I'm like, okay, right. Can you please go over to the ticketing agent? More on the ticketing agent in a second. And then that ticket agent would then have more access in the system, start diving in and like finding out. And perhaps they requested to make a date change, but hasn't finished paying for it or something, or the company did something and some further transaction needs to complete. and then they can associate the e-ticket with the reservation, the record locator, and then check-in can
But they had paid, correct?
sometimes not.
Because I mean, this happened to me about a year and a half ago where I was booking something and I got through, put in the credit card number, then I get the error message at the end, and it's just like, okay, well, did this go or not? And it's saying, well, contact us in 48 hours if you don't have anything. So then I did, and they're like, well, yeah, you ended up with a shell booking. So like they had to go and find by I think by my birthday and my name that they eventually found me and found the routing, everything, and then they're like, yeah, it's not fully done. And of course, in the couple of days, the price had changed a little, not drastically, but it was still like, okay, it just sort of ended up as a ghost ticket, no like nowhere, but no money associated with it and no payment associated with it.
Right. And if you had not been so savvy on it and just, I don't know, or maybe someone asked someone else to do it for you and didn't really go through, you would have shown up at the airport with zero.
Exactly. And it would be
Nothing
like,
to
well,
do.
there's no flight, and well, there's a flight, but it's
You can't
way
get
more
on.
than you think you were going to pay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so we were talking, yeah, the ticketing agent. So just a sidebar here, every airline has a ticketing component because obviously this is the lifeblood of how this side of things work. And they have specialized agents that work specifically on ticketing because ticketing is a quite a higher level of skill. They have to go and get trained on the systems, the back end for each airline, because this is like handling the financial side, basically. I mean, the ticketing is kind of like the on-site accountant for each
Yeah.
flight. In a traditional sense, a traditional line, you would go to the airport, there would be, well, I guess nowadays it's bag drop and check-in assistance, or just let's just say call that all check-in in general. And those agents, for the most part, are not trained
Not
ticketers.
ticketers. Yeah.
You may have a ticketing agent filling the shift of a check-in agent, but the ticket agent would have their own counter, or a lot of times, depending on the
Well,
physical system
you
they're
and I
flying,
have shared the experience in Frankfurt where it was like, regular check-in desk. We needed to do something with a specific ticket.
go
And it was
across.
like, up and across the road and into the office building. And there was a
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
ticketing location.
Yeah, and I mean that being a hub, they basically had like a business office just for ticketing.
Yeah.
A lot of airlines, you're standing at a check-in desk, they'll be like turn around and behind you on the other wall is the
Is the
ticket
ticketing desk. Yeah.
office. Yeah. And what's unfortunate is, you go to check in, there might be 10 desks open for all this bag drop and whatnot, but there might be only one or two ticketing agents. And anyone that presents themselves to a ticket agent needs at least 10 minutes of
Mhm.
time. So sometimes you get thrown into that line as like 10 people ahead of you. You got to be very careful with your time on this,
Yeah. Yeah.
pushing things
And
because
you're like, I'm in a line, and you don't realize it's a ticketing person. It's like, what's taking this person so long to check
yeah,
in?
because they're dealing with complex issues or like making phone calls to further backend systems
Yeah.
that are beyond their reach. And I've seen this so many times. I've had people yell at me. I've seen people yell at agents. Why can't you fix it? Because A, the agents aren't trained at the check-in counters, and B, also the computer system they're using is not the one for ticketing, or they're just simply not trained. They don't even have a login to do anything.
Or it locks out the parts that they would need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I remember once I was working check-in for BA in Calgary. I was working was it business class or first clubboard line? Gentleman comes up, check in, and I must have probably maybe went so fast, or I just hit enter, click, click, click a bit too quickly, and I missed the little thing saying no e-ticket associated. And there was an override button. I must have somehow zoomed it through. I checked him in, issued a boarding pass,
Oh no.
his bags, sent him along his way to the lounge. How? I don't know. There must have been some way that, and maybe because I was the manager in my login, I could just ignore warnings or something like this.
But it let you through.
There's probably an option to essentially let this person ride for free, is what I was doing. So about half an hour later, the ticketing agent is just kind of monitoring, catching up. She's like, "Hey, did you check this guy in? Yes. How? Because there's no e-ticket associated with it. Like, oh no. So she digs through, digs through, digs through. She's like, yeah, his company needs to made a change, and there's like some $2,000 or $3,000 owing on this ticket. You
Oh,
cannot get
well.
on that plane.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man. So I had to go myself to the lounge, find him, and explain to him that, yeah, you need to
It's on
cough up
me.
some cash here, sir. He knew there was a change, but he didn't realize any of this. He thought it was all just taken care of. And of course, when I
Okay.
checked him in, that just finalized it saying, it's done, just get on the plane.
Yeah.
You had to whip out a credit card. I go take it back to the desk. I had to get the receipt. I had to bring it back. I had to reprint. Oy, I never did
Yeah,
that.
because of course he's already in the red zone, right?
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly. So one of the points we mentioned is this thing about control, and control is important. Airlines can't just hand off your reservation. That's why sometimes you see people screaming at one airline agent saying, "You need to fix this. Just put me on any airline." It's not that simple. Airlines, of course, don't want to give up your money.
Yeah.
They want to hang on to it as long as they possibly can,
And they don't want to pay money to another airline, especially a competitor, if they can avoid it.
if they can avoid it. So unless obviously that's why they will rebook you, they will do anything they can. They will upgrade you if that's their only choice to maintain control of the fare that you've paid, because that is the ultimate end goal. Can they assign it over? They can, and there are mechanisms to do that. But if we're talking airline to airline, it's fairly simple because they're all talking the same language. And when there's flight disruptions, airlines eventually have to help each other out, and we would have that. Again, keep going back to the British Airways. If our flight canceled, first thing we do is call Air Canada because they would be departing around the same time. Same thing, Calgary to Heathrow. I'd call and say, "Do you have space on your plane?" Yes. How many? Okay, I'm going to send passengers over, and they would say, "Yeah, make sure you FIM it, FIM." Which you don't see too often. I mean, you don't physically as a passenger get to put eyes on it much because it's all electronic. But
As
first,
opposed to the old days where,
yeah, you get this physical slip. So it's called a flight interruption manifest. So essentially, it's an extra physical
kind of
item
an
that
IOU from the airline to the other airline or something.
pretty much, and it would say, okay, for this sector, let's continue with my BA and Air Canada story.
Yeah.
I, BA, relinquish the rights of this money over to Air Canada to continue on with this passenger. And then everything moves across, and BA would not see that money for that sector. It's how that would work.
And then when X passenger lands in Heathrow and is connecting onward to Cape Town, we will retake over the ticket kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. But where it starts to get complex is when you're talking about the body of the travel agent and how a travel agent exists. Or, I mean, we say travel agent is almost an antiquated term. It's really these third-party booking
Mhm.
engines. They are essentially the modern travel agent or the entity of it, which is why when you call in to a lot of airlines, they say, nope, your travel agent has to fix it. They are retaining control of it. And same thing, the travel agent wants to retain control because any changes, fees, they're going to make an ancillary profit
They
on the
make the
side.
ancillary fee. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it happens sometimes, when you book with a travel agent, you get the airline charge and then you get this weird looking IATA thing on your credit card and you're like, what is this? It's like, well, yeah, it's the ancillary fees going to your travel agent.
yeah. Or sometimes you get like three charges.
Yeah,
You get two specific or airline specific ones, and then like this other one, which is kind of like where the profit margin is coming from and how they
exactly.
work it. I mean, sometimes it's so basic, it's ridiculous that a travel agent has to work in this way. I mean, the way I remember traveling, you would go to an office, they would sit at a computer, you would say, please book this. You would run through some options. Are you happy? And it's there in front of you. You see it. They hit enter, you swipe credit card, they pay, they print out a thing, you walk away, and it's over. Now,
And the dot matrix printer goes and gives you your
yeah,
itinerary.
zooms
Yeah.
back and forth. Now, sometimes it's so simple that, okay, I'll book this for you. You pay them the money, and then they will physically turn to another computer, open the website of airlines, and
Yep.
book it as if you
Book
and
it
I are
for
just
you.
sitting at home booking, and they've
Yeah.
charged you a fee for that convenience. This came up with my mother-in-law recently, flying Vancouver to Taipei. You know, they're elderly, so I manage all the flight side of things, but they like to go to um, a travel agent um, here in Vancouver. They feel they get a better deal, whatever. They want to pick their flights and pay, great. I essentially just manage the check-in and the processing side of things. So I went into their, oh, first of all, we're like, okay, can you send the booking reference? And typically they'll send a screenshot or print out something with an airline logo on it.
Yeah.
In this case, it was EVA. All they could send was like this text photo screenshot, blurry. Someone like when you take a photo on someone else's phone
Yeah. And
of their
didn't
flight,
focus.
yeah, their flight date and time, and that was kind of it. I'm like, where is the? I was
Where's the
asking for where's
reference?
the PNR, booking reference, anything. She's like, oh, it was never sent. It was never sent. I'm like, who did you book this through? So finally, I really had to like use my eyes. I found the e-ticket number in this silly screenshot.
Okay.
I managed to get in. The EVA website's very good where you can use the e-ticket to log in and find info. Fine, I get in, I see everything, all is good. And then I see like under contact information, it's some random woman's name with a Hotmail email address and some phone number. I'm like, what is who, how? And it's I think exactly what we just said is this person has taken my in-laws cash, which it was the correct amount, so it was
Yeah.
fine, and said, great, pocketed the money, maybe tossed on a tiny fee, I don't know, something. Or maybe they are a legit travel agent and is booking this kind of personal style.
Yeah.
So heaven forbid, had anything gone sideways with that flight, actually in this case, it would probably be more simple that the airline would have retained control of it, but the contact person, the person who booked it, would have had to have gotten involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you go start finding that person when things are going
Yeah. It's a
sideways?
holiday weekend, and where are they?
Exactly, exactly.
And
Yeah.
if it had been, like booked regular travel agents, I mean, most large airlines have a specific travel agent login site,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or they call in, they give like their
the specific
credentials.
code for
Yeah.
themselves as a travel agent.
Now, the one thing you did mention earlier was all the different fare classes. So, we don't have to go too crazy on this, but
And we did discuss it when we talked about vocabulary.
yeah, when you look at your details and you look at when you go shopping for flights, obviously you see a myriad of prices. And I remember doing a university class lesson on this about how airline fares are broken down. Like on one plane, you can have
Hundreds.
available in 100 different fare classes and how it's all broken. It's generally by letter, you know, F, J, almost every in the letter of the alphabet can be used depending on the airline. And what it represents is economies of scale. So, there could be a certain letter class for the cheapest seats on the plane, but there may only be 5 seats at that price. And it just keeps on scaling up by quantity.
Yeah, that bucket fills up, then it's gone, and move on to the next bucket, kind of.
Yeah, so that's why people are getting infuriated saying, oh, well, the price went up. The airline is raising their prices. No, the airline is not raising the price. The price of the flight is set from whenever the schedules get set for the most part in a rough sense. The reason the price went up is because someone beat you to it.
Yeah,
Purchased
but I'm
the
sure. I mean, the price is set, but I'm sure like the airline might change the proportion of how many
That is
seats in a
true.
class, right?
That is absolutely so. When they fire out a seat sale, they're either releasing a new fare class at another price point, or they're revising the available capacity of a particular price point fare class. Yeah, exactly. Which is why that whole theory of, it's very expensive. If you have to do a last minute flight, it's expensive because all those cheaper fare classes, people have had months and months and months to purchase all that. So
Yeah.
when you're like trying to book something 2 days out, you're left with most likely the higher ones, which is in a general cash category for economy class is called Y class. That's like the highest. So full fare
Yeah.
Y
Full
class.
fare economy class. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're getting into like business and first, I mean, first is just F. For most airlines, it's like we're going to charge you this 5-digit figure. If you're willing to pay that, you can do whatever you want. You can change, you can move.
Yeah.
It's fine. I mean, in business class, there are a couple of restrictive ones. It's
Yeah. There's like low service business class, like some of them not including a lounge, but you get the in-flight experience, and then others that do include lounge experiences and other things. So
yeah. And this then brings, segues into when you have to make changes. So you book your thing, it's cheap, for whatever circumstance you need to change. You call into an airline or you call into a travel agent and you get quoted some ridiculous price. And
mhm.
typically, this is composed of two things: a change fee and a fare class difference. Because
Yeah.
most likely your original fare class that you booked is long gone. So you basically have to pay the difference to the next available class, whatever that may be. So, if you bought in the lower rungs and all the other tiers above you are being swallowed up, you have to jump quite a ways higher to be able to get on that plane because the equivalent one that you're flying at is just simply not available. Other
Yeah.
passengers bought it. Yeah.
And
Uh,
even if it is a straight across change, it's like, well, your bucket costs more than when you bought it.
exactly. And then with that comes a change fee. And this is simply airline saying, well, it's kind of like your penalty, I guess. They call it a
Yeah.
change fee. It's like, well, it'll cost you the fare difference, but it's also going to cost you,
$75.
yeah, or whatever to simply change. And then some tickets are just so restrictive, is like no change, end of discussion. Don't even
Yeah.
bother
No
calling.
change, no refund.
It's
Fly
over.
it and cross your fingers, or it's like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, it might almost be cheaper just to buy a new ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah, or a new fare. But where it changes can all that kind of gets omitted is when you're dealing with, you know, irregular operations and flights get canceled, reroutings, and that the airline has full power to waive all that stuff because
Yeah.
especially if it's their fault, why would you need to pay extra? That would be
Yeah.
getting a bit much.
Well, and I think to myself, it's like, all right, I mean, I had a points ticket, and when I had my whole issue, it's like, because it was points in business, I'm like, well, I've got a few more options than if I had been points in economy, because they're like, in worst case scenario, they could be like, look, we can get you on a flight, but we're gonna have to like bump you down into an economy seat because that's all that's available. As
Exactly.
opposed to
Points
somebody in
is its own
economy
cost.
where it's like, well, you paid for points in economy, we can't bump you up.
Yeah, because points is its own fare class as
Yeah.
well. Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
And
And then
and
there's
and I know that, oh,
canceling.
sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, people are like, well, like what's the cheapest day or the cheapest time to buy tickets? And I mean, Tuesdays or 3 months out or 7 months out or something. It's like, given the absolute, you know, how quickly and the information that comes into an airline, it's like they'll change prices whenever. So it's like, don't expect that flight's going to be the cheapest on the Tuesday. Maybe they'll change their bucket on a Thursday night. Maybe they'll change it on a Monday. So it's like, if it's cheap, buy it.
Exactly. And that all came from the original theory of, when is the low peak
Yeah.
days of the week to travel. It's like less people travel on, say, that Tuesday.
But
So
I mean,
therefore
like,
there'll be
the
more
low
of those
peak
fares.
days are different, but people are like, well, what day do I book on? Because they think that like the airlines change their prices on
Which they
Tuesdays.
do. Yeah, exactly. And they don't.
Yeah. But it's like, yeah, I mean, there are low peak days to fly, which would be cheaper, but don't go on a certain day of the week, or don't expect, my flight is 93 days away. This is going to be the cheapest time to book it.
There was that. an old, what do I call it? Stipulation that if you stayed a Saturday night,
Right. If you stayed over Saturday, yeah, your flight got
your
cheaper,
fare
right?
would go down
Yeah.
quite a bit.
Yeah. The old business, well, business people aren't flying this flight, so therefore we'll make it cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my father would used to always do that. It's like, oh yes, must stay this Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like how you ended up with like people like you couldn't buy like two one ways, or it was really hard to buy two one ways. You had to buy a return if you were going to do the cities, especially overseas. And it's what led to skip lagging and booking, say, Toronto to Seattle, but oops, I've got out in Vancouver and missed my connection, but I really only wanted to go to Vancouver.
Exactly. Yeah, and then that brings, and I'm a bit out of date on this, to be honest. Like the whole auto canceling, if you don't fly a certain sector, does it auto cancel the following sectors? It still happens. I'm
I
just not
believe
sure
it does. Yeah, that it's like,
how the mechanisms of that work. Because again, with the paper one, if you didn't turn in that paper on that first one, the agent couldn't put a tick mark in the system, and then the second airport would look for that information, be
yeah,
like, oh, they didn't get the paper, so this person's not traveling.
yeah.
Null and void. Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I mean, if people do skip lag, it's like, yeah, don't book a return ticket because your return is probably going to get messed up.
Yeah. And that the theory still holds true that if it's cheaper to buy a return than two one ways for the most part. But the airlines are getting pretty transparent now. Like you see the cost per sector
Hmm.
and it doesn't change. Like, yeah, it's hard to say. Depends on the route, depends on the airline and how antiquated or non-antiquated they
Yeah,
are.
it doesn't seem to be so much, secret sauce as it used to be.
Yeah. And you touched on it earlier, everyone says, "Oh, when's the cheap time? When's good to buy?" Yeah, obviously buying in advance is good and keeping an eye for seat sales, but I always just tell friends, look, if you see the fare and it's in your budget and you're comfortable with it, then just get it.
Yeah,
Like, don't think a miracle is going to come down there because those days are really, I mean, yes, there are still some wild, amazing fares that show up,
yeah.
but a lot of times there's a lot of stipulations or data. Like, if it works for you, the dates are good, buy it and don't look back.
And
Don't
there are
start.
cases, where there are accidental prices that go up. I mean, some airlines are great and they'll hold them, but other airlines are like, yeah, we made a mistake and too bad, pay the full price.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there's also cancellations and refunds. So sometimes you have to simply cancel the trip. And
Hmm.
there's always one small code that exists on every ticket coding section. It says NON-REF, non-ref,
Non-ref, yeah.
non-refundable portion. And I mean, with the low, cheap economy type tickets, most of them are
Yeah, and
non-refundable.
those are the ones that are going to show up in the search. It's like, oh, I'm looking on Momondo or something. It's like, yes, flight from London to New York for return for $400 or something. It's like, yeah, non-ref.
Exactly. But sometimes you'll see, non-refundable portion say is $100. You've paid like $2,000. Well, $100 hit to cancel your flight is
Yeah,
not bad, right? So you have to look at those bits in there.
or so it's like non-refundable, but if you pay, it is.
If you if you cancel, they'll give you
Yeah.
everything but that $100 back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah, they'll retain that. So say if you pay 2,000, non-refundable portions 100, you're gonna get
yeah,
1,900
nine
back.
1900 back. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we hold it. We hold everything, but
yeah, and that's
yeah.
just kind of for your troubles.
Yes.
Yeah. Another one that's starting to get really complex is all things about alliances and code shares. And
Yes.
again, who has ownership of the ticket? And
And who hands over and when does it hand over? And
yeah, it gets very wild.
now that
I
we've got
don't-
like airlines who are like sharing like point systems, say like Avios with like Qatar and Finnair and British Airways, all being in the
Yeah,
same thing. It's like, well, okay, you're all sharing the same frequent flyer, but it's like, are you? holding on to the ticket, or what are you doing? Or
Yeah, and whose camp does this money sort of lie on? I have a friend that has flown Malaysia, Hong Kong, Vancouver, Edmonton, and the same routing on the way back.
Mhm.
She bought it on Cathay, bought everything through Cathay, but the Vancouver to Edmonton portion is a physical WestJet flight,
Right.
and it shows their code share operated. So then I was looking at the return for her. So the return is Edmonton, Vancouver, Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur. Well, on this one, Edmonton, Vancouver is WestJet codeshare, but Vancouver to Hong Kong is also WestJet codeshare, but it's a Cathay flight.
Okay.
Because we were just trying to be like, oh, how much would it cost to change and have a stopover in Vancouver to visit and whatnot? And in my mind, I was like, well, I'm sure if you just call Cathay, they'll fix you up. Like they can quote you and get all sorted out. But then I looked at the booking ref. I'm like, wait a minute, does she need to call WestJet actually to start? Or I was also
Yeah.
confused. I don't know. I gotta find out what happened. But there's only one record locator showing, and it's on Cathay like system stocks. It's not
Yeah.
like we're dealing with like travel agent or third party here. So it's a wild one.
And did
But
you ever figure it out? Or are
no,
you still working on
I
it?
should get an update. I'm not part of the change, but I just notice it and mention it. I'm like, this might be a little bit more confusing than you initially thought.
And going back to your situation, refund less whatever amount. It's like, some airlines, they'll tell you, hey, like if you cancel within 24 hours, no fee. Some airlines might miss that and be like, well, we're still going to charge you the $100 or the whatever. It's like, well, double check because I mean, if you're supposed to get it back, or if you are supposed to get it back, I mean, let the airline know.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, you probably come across this complaint in your line of work, people demanding refunds for airlines canceling things. And at the end of the day, it's like, did the airline honor what they were supposed to do? Right? You paid money to said airline. They transferred it over to another airline. Did that other airline complete the task? Did they fly you from here to here? Yes or no?
Yeah.
It gets very
And
simple.
it's like, was a boarding pass issued? I mean, it's the biggest first question that gets asked. And then like, okay, like did they transfer you over? Yeah. I mean, is it still within a reasonable description of when you flew? Like if you were supposed to fly on the 23rd and you fly still on the 23rd, it's like, all right, you're still going that way. But I mean, it's like, well, we're going to transfer you, but you're not going to fly till the 27th. It's like, all right, well, maybe you've got something you can talk to your credit card to be like, all right, they told me the 23rd, but they're flying me on the 27th. So this is not what I had
Yeah.
intended to buy. So they may be able to squeeze something through and try with an airline to help you try to get your money back.
Yeah. Another realm that we've kind of experienced with is when people buy these all-inclusive vacations. So it includes your flight, your airport transfer, generally in a sun destination. So transfer being like,
And an all inclusive.
and then a full all-inclusive stay at a resort, entertainment, meals, accommodation, and then the trip home. And I remember being quite enlightened by this one, out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, the middle of winter, extreme weather flights would cancel, no doubt.
Yeah.
So we had one, it was an Air Transat flight, major flight, full Airbus A330 canceled going to probably Cancun or one of the usual places. So we have to line everybody up and say, you're going to go tomorrow. We have to hotel everybody, the full meal deal, reaccommodate. And this one man came up with his family. He wasn't yelling, but he was actually quite interesting how he laid it out. So he had his paper printout of his travel package, and
Mm-hmm.
he actually had the station manager. She was the one that he got, and I was on the side listening. So he said, "Well, I'm very annoyed because I've paid money, and according to what it says here, I'm supposed to be provided a flight, transfer, food, entertainment, and accommodation today, and I'm not going to get that today. So what am I getting?" And she processes very quickly. She said, "Okay, you're going to be provided a flight tomorrow. We're going to give you a hotel. I'm going to give you meal vouchers for the food. There is a TV in the room for your entertainment, and we're going to give you the transfer to get to the hotel. And he really couldn't argue with that. He's like, that's a fair answer. So thank you very much. And give me everything that you promised to give me, and we will go to the hotel.
Yeah.
Okay.
As opposed to like if an airline cancels out and you've got that whole thing and it's like, all right, we're not vouchering you at a hotel. It's like, all
Yes.
right,
Go
I'm
home
like,
kind of thing.
I've booked for 7, but you're only giving me 6 days at a hotel. Like now you're out
Exactly.
to, 1/7 of my hotel cost.
Exactly. Exactly. And then some airlines they do that, they like just go home, come back. And I guess with a standard domestic flight, that's the expectation is we don't care who you are, where you're coming from. Just come back and get on this thing tomorrow or X hours
Yeah.
later or whatnot. Yeah.
But yeah, with a package, it's like, yeah, like I paid for 7 days for a hotel. You're not giving me 7 days at a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, Sometimes airlines talk and it doesn't work into your advantage. I can't remember if I brought this story up before, but a late to meet baggage cut off at Pearson and then a misconnection in Heathrow to go on to Barcelona. I don't think
This
maybe I
one I don't
did.
think we did, or maybe you did long ago.
So the routing was Toronto, Heathrow, Madrid, actually, sorry. And Toronto Heathrow was on Air Canada. Yes, two separate tickets. The one classic two separate ticket put together. Transfer onto British Airways.
And was it tickets
To
put
Madrid.
together by yourself or by a travel agent?
Put together by myself. So the Air Canada portion was a standard, just go out and buy a fare. The BA portion, because I worked for BA at the time, we had this something called a hot fare, which is basically a discounted fare for staff, fully confirmed, with a bit of a discount on it, like 20% or something. So I bought one of those. Fine. In my flaw, I get to Pearson and miss the baggage drop cutoff. Now, I probably should have yelled and screamed while I was in the long line, but I didn't. And by the time I got there, they said, "No, you're cut off. You can't get on this flight." I'm like, oh, I said, "Go to the ticketing line." Okay, so I go and join the ticketing line, and they were very good. Yeah, no problem. We'll just put you on the next one in 2 hours. Okay, fine, whatever. No, no penalty. I didn't. It was quite good. Get to Heathrow, and I've now missed my onward connection to Madrid. So
Mm-hmm.
I therefore need to attempt to get onto the next one. Pick up the bag, go to the BA counter, said, missed my connection. And I said, Air Canada just put me on the next. I didn't allude to the fact that it was my fault.
Yeah.
I just said it was a late flight and missed the connection by Air Canada. Can you put me onto the next one? And they looked and saw that it was a staff ticket, which generally they're not going to do any changes for. And they said, "What was the reason you didn't?" I said, "Oh, the flight was late. I just completely was trying to like blag my way out."
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe she was like a rule follower. She went to the back, called Air Canada, and said, "What was the reason code?" And it was clearly there, missed baggage cutoff or something. So it comes
Oh,
back off
wow.
saying, "Sir, you missed your baggage drop, so therefore you like it's your fault." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot about that little fact. Sorry, so sorry." She, yeah, she still did it anyway. She just
Yeah.
kind of gave me like the talk,
Yeah.
scolding me. I was like, so sorry, it'll never happen again.
The school marm or something. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And no money, but it was
Yeah.
2 hours late to Madrid, and that was the end of it. And yeah, so they do talk. That, or I mean, they can talk
Yeah.
like manually, like pick up the phone and call and ask, "Hey, can you tell me what you see on your screen? I'll share yours if you share mine," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then these days, I mean, with like all the tracking software, it's like, yeah, let me just pull up a website. No, your flight was on time.
Well, that's a very good point. Yeah, it's not hard to just whip out your phone and pull up FlightAware and get the real data
Yeah.
and everything. Oh, the gate was so far. I had to run. Your gate was
No.
100 meters away. or did it? Well, I had to do the take the bus, and it took a long time. No, your gate was here in the terminal.
Exactly. If you're liking this episode experience, you may also enjoy Experience 1 Maiden Flight. It's available wherever you listen to your podcasts.
So one last tidbit, Seat 1A tip is when these PNRs, passenger name references, record locators are created, how the name gets entered is very specific. And we may have touched on this once before when it comes to online check-in. I just wanted to raise it again because it's so relevant. It's still there to this day. The computer systems that run all these reservation systems and check-in systems with the airlines, Sabre, GDS, and there's a few others out there.
Amadeus.
Yeah, they're still like basically written by code. And how letters and numbers get entered, it has to follow a specific thing. And where this comes in is when you're going to go manage your booking or do online check-in, you have to enter it exactly how it's been booked, of course, per your passport. But if you have any middle names or anything like that that comes into play, certain spaces and characters can be omitted and be slammed into like mumble jumble. But you have to enter it that way in order to proceed. And a lot of people don't intuitively think that they would have to do that. Right. So if you have a passenger, his name is, I don't know, Alex Jeff,
Yep.
so and so, you have to just put no space. So it's Alex Jeff, and as it looks like one word. And
Yep.
that's simply because the backend systems read it that way. Or names can get cut off when you have like an infant. You have this I and F in the front
Mm-hmm.
to indicate that. So it changes the rest. It gets,
Or
most airline websites.
certain names that are just long.
Yeah, I mean, I have 11 letters in my last name. I mean, most airline websites are pretty consumer user friendly. It'll
Global user. Yep.
pull the whole thing in, but sometimes when you're in like, I don't know, you touch on backend systems throughout the passenger experience, that comes up. So it's kind of just a interesting thing to know because that is your PNR and that's how you're going to be booked. It's whatever is on that. Either hopefully it's been booked correctly per your passport or travel document, or maybe sometimes it isn't, and the travel agent has booked you under some other name and it's not coming up that way.
Yeah, and I know like I've heard, enough people say like, oh but man, like I I typed the name of my like I made an error on the ticket name when I was typing it in, and it's like the name was misspelled, and it's like, well, I can't correct it now. It's like that's one I was like, not to be like judgmental, but I'm just like, okay, well, like this is a really important purchase. Make sure you've got the names of you,
Exactly.
your partner, your spouse, your kids.
Yeah.
Make sure you double and triple check because you're probably not going to be able to change it and you're going to have to pay for it again.
And we'll think about it this way, that file folder we've talked about is permanent, like what's written on it. It's permanent ink.
Yeah.
So when you do a mistake like that, they can't just use whiteout and
Yeah.
change that name. They basically have to like create a brand new file
Yeah.
folder,
Shred the folder and
import everything over, take all the money you've paid, somehow move it into the other one, make the new one good, and shred the old one. So it's
yeah.
not just simply oh, can you just change my name? It's a process. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's there.
Yeah.
We mentioned that my in-laws had flown back to Taiwan, and another silly thing that this Hotmail travel agent had done. So they have Taiwanese passports, they have Canadian passports. When they generally fly on the Taiwanese ones, just because it makes it simpler going in and out of there.
Mhm.
Um, and in this one, so in the Taiwanese passport, my mother-in-law's uses the maiden name, and the Canadian passport uses the married name. In this case, the Canadian passport was used to book,
Okay.
which I mean, it's fine because Canadians don't need a visa to go into Taiwan.
Right.
And really, once you arrive at the immigration counter in Taipei, who cares what passport was used. You just throw down whatever you think you're going to use to get into the country.
Right.
But it just got a bit complex when I was managing the booking. I'm like, okay, well, it's got the Canadian stuff here. It knows it's a Canadian passport. It's asking me for all this info about visa stuff, and you have to like click no, don't need. I'm like, this is very annoying. This is not the way
Well,
it
and
was.
it reminds me of I was listening to friends, Paul and Alex on their podcast, and Alex has a UK and a US passport, and he entered into, I think it was into Hawaii or something, and he had used the British one or something going one way, and then he's trying to exit with the other
That's
passport,
right. Yes, I
and
remember this.
they're like, well, what's going on? He's like, well, what did you enter with? It's like, oh, right, yes, and so it's like,
Yeah.
so names and countries, well, they can matter.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, the computer side of things just gets too much and it messes it up. It's just very annoying.
Yeah,
Yeah. Versus the
exactly.
good old days. So there we go.
Yeah,
We've been trying to get back to this one for a while since episode one.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's a good one. It ebbs and flows through all things that, in air travel and non-air travel. I mean, even the rail systems in Europe essentially followed.
yeah. And you've got I added booking codes for some of the larger train stations, so all starting
Yeah.
with Z.
All right. So what do
So
we
yeah,
got
what
going
do we
on
got in
in
the
the
news? We
news?
got some interesting things happening. We've talked in the past about lounges and lounge experiences, and Vinod and I have talked about our lounge experiences. But there's a story from Simple Flying. British Airways reportedly offering passengers money to avoid Heathrow lounges, and the incident occurred as a large portion of the carrier's flights were delayed, increasing the number of passengers using the facilities. And so essentially, what they were stating was that because British Airways had canceled 7 flights on 11th September and then another 4 on 10th of September, well, this was going on, and so this person stated they were trying to get into the gallery's first lounge. However, this passenger had apparently received a £30 offer to not use the lounge. And so he essentially then was being offered the compensation to not use the lounge. And apparently the person at the lounge said, the lounge is very busy, sir. I can offer you £30 if you choose not to come in today.
It's funny. I see this so much on different user groups that I'm on, and you mentioned Paul and Allison layovers. They obviously talk about this quite a bit because they're in and out of Heathrow a lot. Yeah, the overcrowded lounge syndrome, and it's incredible. Like, everyone wants to get in there to have their peace and quiet and free
It ends up
food, but
being
it almost
louder
goes the
and
opposite way.
busier. I mean, I remember last year when I was in Cape Town, it was like I think I got like the last seat or something in the entire lounge. It was just like shoulder to shoulder full of people.
Yeah, I experienced this in Singapore and Changi. I forget exactly which lounge, but same thing. You get like this rush hour period of all the big flights going out. Well, although I guess in Singapore every flight's a big flight going out, and people practically almost sitting on the floor. Like, there's no privacy. Yeah, there's this validity to just going in the regular terminal, finding a gate that's not occupied, and just hanging out by the window and doing some plane spotting.
Exactly. Yeah, because sometimes, yeah, you may not get the food or whatever or the drink, but it's like, it's less stress than going into a super busy lounge. And, who knows if they're, especially the ones that have like all the different airlines, plus all the different credit cards, plus all the different, pass systems. It's like,
Oh, it's too
who knows?
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like the novelty of getting the lounge, you should simply be, what did your fare class include?
Yes, exactly.
Access to a lounge. Fantastic. End of discussion. Now it's like the freaking flyer side, and then you nailed it. Like all these credit card schemes and passes that allow you to get in, which I mean, it has its place in the world, but the physical lounge that gets hit can
Yeah,
take a beating.
exactly.
Yeah. So now moving on to slightly more. what's the word? Olfactory story. Also from Simplifying, Singapore Airlines passengers demand refund after farting dog disrupts their flight. Oh boy.
Yikes.
So a couple were on a flight from Paris to Changi to Singapore, and they were in premium economy. And they were placed next to a passenger that had an emotional support dog. Well, seems like this dog was
Needing
farting
emotional support.
and being, yeah, it needed it. Farting and drooling, using up legroom, and basically was not, I don't want to say not well behaved, but it had issues, the dog.
Yeah, and it didn't match up to say like a Singapore Airlines premium economy experience.
Yeah. Had to be on the floor, taking up the legroom of this couple. So they were they were not impressed. And I can imagine, I mean, you're trapped, and that's,
A 13-hour flight
yeah, that's a full on. And you paid to be in premium economy, and this shows up, and they wouldn't. There's nowhere for them to move,
in
so they
premium
are
economy.
demanding. What's that? Sorry.
It was, I mean, there was no space in premium economy, but there was like the back row of economy.
That's what it was. Yeah. So yeah, they were offered. Oh yeah, that's. They were offered 100 Singapore dollars or 73 US dollars gift voucher for a Singapore Airlines Chris Shop website.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, when I read that part, I was like, it just seemed like Singapore had like a really bad disconnect on their customer experience, and like the hundred Singapore dollars. It's just like,
That's a bit
yeah,
soft.
for their own site. It's like, well, that's like,
Yeah. I mean, they did get a little bit more after writing back again, which is like,
yeah,
you've done it yourself. If you're persistent with your issue, they will respond. They got a $117 travel voucher in the end.
yeah.
So they got
But I'm
something.
sure now that it's around the world in all sorts of travel websites and other news sites around the world, I'm sure that whoever's in charge of media relations at Singapore or public relations, I'm sure there's
Probably all over
quiet
that.
emails and phone calls and letters probably
Yeah,
getting
exactly.
delivered to these this couple. So,
Yeah,
but
crazy. Yeah,
yeah, I
so
mean, the worst I had was what Munich to Newark, and there was a dog in a carrier that somehow they were able to put in the overhead bin at that time, and it would whine every time I was about to fall asleep.
hold that story. Hold that story because
You bet. Yeah,
and
so I'm gonna
that,
hold that story.
you're going to hold that story, and we're going to wrap this up.
Excellent. Yeah, so that wraps up Experience 76 of the Seat 1A podcast. If you liked this podcast experience, be sure to rate us and subscribe. Tell your friends and fellow travelers about us. Make sure you visit us at podcast.seat1a.org for complete show notes. That's Sierra Echo Alpha Tango, the number 1, alpha.org. Feedback, addenda, letting us know where we've messed up. You can send all of that to stories, STORIES, at seat1a.org. If you'd like to support the show financially, we have a page at Patreon, patreon.com/seat1a. Links are included in the show notes.
And here's what we can look forward to in upcoming C1A podcast experiences. And funny you mention it, we are actually going to discuss pets in flight, pets traveling, and we're going to conjure up some interviews with some fellow frequent flyers. As always, we look forward to your stories. If there's anything you'd like us to talk about or some interesting travel stories you'd like to share, please do let us know.
So until the next time, I'm Jeff. Thanks for listening.
And I'm Vinod. You're cleared for takeoff. Have a great flight.